All right, we're back for part 2 of the essay 4 kind of feedback session. I know it's not live feedback, but I'm hoping that it will be relevant and helpful to many of you. So I wanted to focus in, for now, we're starting with introductions and we're going to move further into the essay. For this one in particular, I thought it was a good example because I want to help process through some clarity issues that might be coming up in the paragraphs. So Scout is one of the main characters in the book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. The novel is told from her perspective on everything and always is showing her point of view on anything. This sentence right here gave me pause as a reader because I had to go back and think, wait, what? I'm not exactly sure what it's saying. The novel is told from her perspective on everything and always is showing her point of view on anything. I'm getting stuck with everything, always, anything. Those are complex words. They're also very far-reaching, and so everything, anything, always, they're big words, and they make big promises, and so how could we edit this for clarity? The novel is told from Scout's perspective, so be specific about your characters, on everything. This is too vague of a term, so I would probably want to change that. The novel is told from Scout's perspective, and you could simply say shows her point of view. So making it more succinct, it still preserves your message. The novel is told from Scout's perspective and shows her point of view. The reader sees throughout the book what she may symbolize and how she is always changing and maturing throughout it. So the reader sees throughout the book what are some of the things that Scout symbolizes. Here in the essay, the student says that she represents a child. What are some other things that she symbolizes? So the reader sees throughout the book that Scout is used to symbolize childhood, limited, perception of racism and oppression of the poor and lower classes, or something like that. So however you want to kind of classify what Scout symbolizes, I would say be specific and don't be afraid to put that in because it adds complexity and helps the reader, again, with clarity to understand what exactly the paper will be arguing. And in the other video, I looked at this one, it very clearly states that Scout represents the innocence of childhood, mental growth that happens as humans grow, and labels that are placed on children. Don't be afraid to be that specific here. So we have she symbolizes, and then childhood, maybe she symbolizes limited perception of racism and oppression of the lower classes. And lastly, how she is always changing and maturing throughout. What's the significance of her changing? You might say, and because she is always changing and maturing throughout, the reader recognizes that humans have the capacity or capability to grow from innocence and immaturity to better understand others and the human condition. So, okay. So the second part is that because she is always changing and maturing through, let's take that part out. The reader recognizes that humans have the capability to grow. That's one argument being made. From innocence and immaturity to better understand others and the human condition. And so that would kind of be the argument there. So do you see how being specific adds complex depth to the essay. Let's do one more before we move on to the next. I thought this one was interesting because it's one chunk entirely, and it's about Jem, but it doesn't give us any directive about where's the introduction, where's the thesis, what's being argued. Without that structure giving us as a reader that insight, it's easy to get confused and think, what is this? So Jem is the son of Atticus Finch and the brother of Scout Finch. He's a boy of 12 at the beginning of To Kill a Mockingbird. You only want to have it italicized, not underlined. And he loved to play around with his sister. He spent all summer messaging with the hermit neighbor Boo Radley and making fun of him. Messing with the hermit neighbor Boo Radley and making fun of him. After a while, he realized Boo Radley had been giving them things and watching them all summer, which scared Jem. Jem, at about 13, decided to start growing up, and he stopped hanging out with his sister and started to read the paper in the mornings. Jem symbolized the progression from childhood to adulthood as he grew up. Okay, so here's the first argument that's being made. Is that the thesis? Perhaps. I don't know. Let's keep reading. He started to read the newspaper to learn about what was going on in town and talk with Atticus more about life. Jem lived in a time where racism was still extremely common. He had a maid who was black. He watched his father work on a trial where a black man was accused of attacking a white woman. There were also different social classes. So it seems like there's the racism element. First, there's him just wanting to learn about life and read the paper. He's 13. He's mature now. Then we have the second element where he becomes aware of racism. And then finally, there is this section on the social classes and being aware of how those are divided. And then racism and classism are unjust because all people are made by God in his image. Everyone should be treated with respect and compassion no matter their station in life. This is now the student's own perspective rather than an argument about the character. So, it looks to me as if this could be the introduction, giving a background on Jem and talking about how he symbolizes adulthood. I would probably be more specific here. Jem symbolized the progression from childhood to adulthood as he grew up. Marking the progression. Oh, you already used the word progression. The awareness of racism, classism, marking the awareness of maturity, okay, so we'll do that. So I'm going to unhighlight this for one moment, and then I'll do the separate. So Jem symbolized the progression from childhood to adulthood as he grew up, marking the awareness of mature current events. So that's him reading the newspaper, recognizing what he did about Boo Radley. Then he became aware of racism. That's the second point. And then classism is the third point. This is very simple, but again, it adds structure to your essay. And so now what the student needs is they need to have some quotes so they can analyze about those topics. Okay, so now we're going to move on from the introduction to looking at the body of the paper. And as you know, body paragraphs need to be separated according to the different points that are made in the thesis. So for instance, this thesis statement makes 3 separate points, and therefore you should have 3 body paragraphs, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, in this thesis statement, there are 3 different points being made as well. And so the first one should be about childhood. And so this is Scout represents any child. That's kind of clear. She has a limited perception of racism and oppression. That's not here. And the last thing is that humans have the capability to grow. And that's what this is going to show. So we're missing that second point, but if you were watching, I added that point just for clarification, so the student would need to probably add a paragraph. This one is interesting because this paragraph is talking about kind of like sexism or feminism a little bit and how Scout is treated differently because she's a girl. And that's nowhere to be seen in this thesis statement. So if you wanted to write a paragraph on that, you need to simply add it up here somewhere. So that Scout is used to symbolize childhood, because she's always changing, maturing, the reader recognizes this. And then you'd add a third point, is that she becomes the lens through which the viewer can see some feminist agendas by the author. Okay, so making sure that there are at least those points here in the body of the paper. This one has 3 points, should have 3 body paragraphs, as it does. 1, 2, 3, and a conclusion. So the structure there is fine. This one should have basically 2 body paragraphs, and it has 3. So we'd have to go through and find out, oh right, so children like to play, Dill is curious, and he has an imagination. So it seems to me that the student chose to divide it according to 3 separate concepts here. Imagination and creativity and playfulness. And then it looks like there's that 4th paragraph on him changing. So 1, 2, 3, and then the change. Okay, so that structure is good. I want to dive into the individual body paragraphs now and give you a look at a few. So which one do I want to work with? Let's work with this one. I'll try to make it larger. Okay. So this one begins by Scout showing readers the innocence of childhood. Something about this needs to be reiterated in the topic sentence. So your topic sentence is going to restate the argument that this paragraph is making. The argument comes from your thesis. So Scout symbolizes the innocence of childhood due to her young age and lack of knowledge of the world around her. That's accurate. Good job. Next, we're shown this in many circumstances, including when she was asked what the word rape meant in chapter 14, and when she defended her father, even though she didn't understand the offensive comments made by her cousin. At a safe distance, he called, "He's nothing but an end-lover." Scout responded by saying, "I don't know what you're talking about, but you better cut it out in this red-hot minute." She knew that what he had said was not something kind and wanted to defend her father, but she did so without knowing the meaning of his words. Okay, so a couple of things here. We're talking about innocence. Now, do your quotes, this case we only really have one quote and a paraphrase, but do these elements reinforce that point that she is innocent because she's a child? They definitely show that she is innocent. She doesn't understand what rape is. She doesn't understand the insult that her cousin calls. But does the student follow up those quotes by analyzing the significance of that and how Scout is an important character because she shows the innocence of childhood? The only piece of analysis we're given is this one sentence. She knew that what he said was not something kind and wanted to defend her father, but she did so without knowing the meaning of his words. That's the first thing you want to explain the quote, but then you need to show why that's significant. So this shows that Scout, or as a representative of children, that children's intentions toward justice and goodness are pure regardless of the specific context and meaning of insults, shame, depravity, and sin. Something like that brings significance to the quote. And then I would say you need to do a second instance of it. Or instead use this as your first example and write analysis following this. Don't just kind of let it hang off there to be analyzed by your reader. Okay, so that's one body paragraph. I'm gonna do one more video and I'll do a couple more body paragraphs and the conclusion for you.